I never expected a Christmas Eve family portrait to feel like a threat, until I walked in and saw my face meticulously erased and delivered my parents an envelope that changed everything. Sometimes the loudest statement isn't a scream, but the sound of paper hitting the table. On Christmas Eve, I spotted the family portrait in its glossy frame. My face had been completely cut out. No one said a word about it the next day. I handed my parents an envelope and quietly said, "Don't open it right now." Naturally, they opened it anyway. My mom burst into tears. My dad's face drained of color. I wish I could say I hadn't seen it coming, that it hit me like a shocking twist at the end of some emotional drama. But truthfully, it didn't feel unexpected. It felt strangely inevitable. I stepped into my parents' living room, snow clinging to my boots as I stomped them clean. I glanced up, and there it was, the photograph, glossy and oversized, expertly framed, placed with care and pride directly above the fireplace, like it was the centerpiece of our family story. Everyone was there. My mom in her signature red blazer, grinning as though she hadn't spent years sighing at anything that didn't involve my sister. My dad frozen in that stiff smile he reserves for posed pictures and golf course selfies. And my sister, of course, at the forefront in a beige turtleneck that probably cost more than my entire month's rent, laughing at some imagined joke, effortlessly. Likeable, effortlessly composed, probably something witty about her trust fund. But I wasn't there. Not even awkwardly tucked into a corner, not blurred in the distance, just entirely absent. It wasn't a sloppy crop, it was meticulous, deliberate. A clean eraser as though I'd been edited out of their story with precision. No smears, no trace, just removed. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom called from the kitchen, her voice light and casual, as if nothing was wrong, as if we were a picture-perfect family. I could smell the rosemary and lemon from whatever she was roasting. Holiday scents, comforting and nostalgic, the ones I used to love back when they still meant something warm. I hung my coat by the door, muttered a quick, "Hello," and stepped into the kitchen. My sister, of course, was already there, swirling wine in her glass like she was filming a holiday special on wine pairings. She leaned in for an air kiss, just close enough for the gesture to count, just distant enough to avoid contact. "You made it," she said, as though I'd shown up late to her carefully planned event, as though this was her home. I didn't respond. I just smiled. The kind of smile you give after you've screamed into your pillow 3 separate times that month and decided your voice wasn't worth spending anymore. Dinner played out like a rehearsed scene. Dad sliced the roast with exaggerated care, hoping for a role in a holiday commercial. Mom praised my sister's glowing skin twice. No one asked how I'd been, inquired where I lived or what I was up to. The only question directed my way was whether I still had that little car, which of course was code for, "We haven't the faintest idea what's happening in your life, and we're hoping you'll offer details so we can pretend we're interested." I didn't take the bait. Instead, I watched my sister open a small box from Mom and Dad, a vintage gold watch. "Nothing extravagant," Mom insisted, which would have been funny if the folded receipt hadn't been tucked beneath the tissue paper. "Oh my God, you guys!" My sister beamed. "This is just wow." Meanwhile, I got a mug that said somebody's favorite daughter, which I'm sure was meant to be ironic, or perhaps hard to say. I excused myself after dessert, said I was tired. Mom offered me the guest room. Not my old room, not the room I grew up in, just the guest room. Base sheets, dusty bookshelf, one flickering lamp. I shut the door behind me, turned on the lamp, which flickered on cue, and sat on the edge of the bed. That's when I pulled out the envelope. It had been sitting in my bag the whole time. Thick ivory paper, embossed seal. I thought about giving it to them in the morning, after the stockings, after the cinnamon rolls, after the performance. But standing in that living room, looking at that photo, seeing my entire existence airbrushed out like a glitch in the family algorithm, yeah, I changed my mind. They didn't just forget me, they erased me carefully and strategically, like I'd been a bad brand partnership. I lay in bed and let the house settle around me, the same creaky floorboards, the same ticking wall clock. Somewhere in the hall, my dad was snoring. My mom's voice drifted up once. Something about bringing out the good plates tomorrow. My sister laughed in that practiced, breathy way of hers, the Golden Child soundtrack. I closed my eyes and thought about the years, the time I got into my dream college and they said, "We're so proud," before immediately asking if I could defer a year so they could help my sister with her portfolio. The time I missed rent and called home and Dad said, "Things are tight right now," while planning a cruise for my sister's birthday. The time I brought home a boyfriend and they forgot his name at dinner. He never came back. I didn't blame him. I was tired of telling myself I was just sensitive. Tired of pretending I misunderstood that night lying in a bed that was supposed to feel familiar but didn't. I decided I would not make excuses tomorrow. I would give them the envelope. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't cry. I would simply smile, say Merry Christmas, and watch the truth do what years of silence never could. I woke up to the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls and the faint sound of my sister's voice saying something about luggage weight limits and how stressful travel is. Devastating, of course. Cue the sigh and pout. I stayed in the guest room a little longer than necessary, not because I was still tired, but because I wasn't in the mood to walk back into the sitcom set that was my family's idea of Christmas. I could already imagine the fake laughter, the overcooked optimism, and someone, probably my mom, saying, "Isn't it nice having everyone together?" As if I hadn't spent the last decade like a blurry background character in every family memory. When I finally wandered into the kitchen, my mother was plating scrambled eggs like she was auditioning for a brunch spread in a lifestyle magazine. My dad sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. My sister was barefoot, sipping almond milk from a wine glass. "Good morning," Mom said without looking up. "Hope you slept okay in the guest room." "The mattress has a personality," I replied, pouring myself some coffee. She laughed like I was joking. We never caught up. No one asked about my job, how I was doing, or whether I was still living in that small apartment with the creaky stairs, which, for the record, I wasn't. My sister talked about her upcoming trip to Barcelona and how lucky she was to have parents who supported her dreams. I didn't say anything, just nodded along like a seat filler at an award show. They still hadn't noticed the envelope sitting in my coat pocket that would come later. Instead, I let my thoughts drift back to everything that led up to this moment. When I graduated high school, I got a scholarship. Not a full ride, but enough if I picked up part-time work. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, paperwork spread out, asking if they could help with the rest. Just a little. My mom gave me a look like I'd asked to pawn her wedding ring. Dad mumbled something about catching up from the bathroom. Remodel, which, fun fact, included heated floors and a Bluetooth bathtub. 2 months later, my sister got a new car for her 18th birthday. White leather seats, custom stereo, a bow on top. She cried when they handed her the keys, told them they were the best parents in the world. I stood next to the recycling bin holding a $20 bill tucked inside a graduation card that said, "You're going places." You know what? I still left for college, worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, ate instant ramen, graduated with honors, moved to a new city, started over. I didn't ask them for anything after that, and they didn't offer when I was laid off 2 years ago. I didn't call when I was sick and couldn't afford my medication. I didn't ask when my apartment flooded and I lost most of my furniture. I bought a used mattress off Craigslist and made do. Meanwhile, my sister posted Instagram stories from Santorini, sponsored, obviously. I used to wonder if maybe it was me, harder to love, more reserved, less shiny. Maybe I should have joined a sorority, smiled more, worn more beige. Maybe if I'd played piano instead of working shifts at a diner, they would have noticed me. Maybe if I hadn't made things so easy, always independent, always fine, they would have realized I needed help too. But then I remembered my 8th birthday. I invited 6 kids over, baked cupcakes myself, and Mom forgot the pizza. We ate cheese slices on saltines. My sister had a dance recital the next day, so the whole thing ended early. They told me, "We'll make it up to you next year." They never did. And so that morning after breakfast, I went upstairs to get dressed, took my time, let them go through their usual motions, gather around the tree, exchange presents, immerse themselves in their polished holiday facade. When I came back down, they were halfway through gift opening. My sister unwrapping something lavish with feigned surprise, Mom's teary-eyed look she'd saved for social media posts, Dad glancing at me to ask, "Got any sleep?" Enough, I said, and he nodded once before turning. Back to my sister. I sat down quietly, reached into my coat pocket, and slid an envelope onto the table, nestled between coffee mugs and torn wrapping paper. No one noticed. Not yet, but they would. 10 minutes later, Mom finally spotted it, as though anything on her reclaimed wood table needed a coaster or a clear reason. She picked it up cautiously, as though it might be a misplaced bill or wedding invitation for the wrong address. "What's this?" she asked, more to the room than to me. I didn't respond right away, just took another sip of coffee, then said, "It's from me." Dad glanced up from prodding wrapping paper on his plate. "You didn't need to get us anything," he said with a smile, as if I'd handed them a novelty mug. "I know," I replied. "I wanted to." That got their attention. Mom sat back, down, turning the envelope over in her hands. "Should we open it now?" she asked. I shrugged. "I'd prefer you didn't." So, of course, they opened it anyway. Dad leaned in over Mom's shoulder as she carefully broke the seal. For a few moments, the only sounds were the soft sliding of pages and the crinkle of paper. I watched my sister fold the handles of her new designer tote just so, as if cradling a newborn she'd named after a French city. Then the silence changed. It thickened. I didn't have to look up. I could feel it. Something between realization and nausea, like the exact moment you realize the milk in your coffee is sour. After Mom's eyes flicked to the second page, Dad let out a breath through his nose. My sister looked over. "What is it?" she asked. They didn't answer. That was my cue. "You knew," I said, standing up slowly. "Merry Christmas." "What is this?" Mom finally asked, her voice quiet and flat, not angry, not confused, just blank. I said, "It's a copy of Grandpa's will." She blinked. "I've seen his will. We handled the estate." "No," I said. "You handled what you told me was the estate you never showed me." "The full will only listed a few keepsakes and some cash to cover funeral expenses, but not the rental property in Old Briar," I continued, "probably because you were already collecting rent from it by then." Dad dropped the papers on the table, like they burned him. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Public records, title searches, tax filings, archived emails, a couple phone calls, a very patient lawyer," I replied. My sister finally stood up. "Wait, what rental property?" "The one by the park," I said, turning to her. "The one you used for that photo shoot last year?" "Yeah, that one." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mom finally found her voice. "Sweetheart, this isn't what it looks like." "That's funny," I said, "because it looks like you used my name, my inheritance, and my legal rights to fund your lifestyle, while telling me there was nothing left for me." "It wasn't like that," she said too quickly. "It was complicated." "It wasn't," I replied. "The will is extremely clear. The house was left to me, sole beneficiary, full title, transferred. Which means all that rent you've been collecting, technically stolen, and the renovations unauthorized." Dad rubbed his temples like the conversation was giving him a migraine. "I hope you have a lawyer," I added. He froze. "I'm not suing," I said, "but I've officially reclaimed ownership of the property. The tenants have been notified. Rent payments will now go to me. Your access is revoked." Mom looked like she might cry, but that house was their income. "That house paid for my tuition, right?" she said, voice shaking. "I know," I replied, "and the car, and the Mexico trip, and probably a few handbags along the way." "That's not fair," my sister snapped. "You didn't need it. You were always the independent one. You made sure of that," I said. Mom's voice shifted into careful territory. "We didn't think you'd want the responsibility. You were busy. You were always so far away." "I was far away," I said, "because you made it very clear I wasn't welcome here." Dad pushed back his chair. "If you leave now, don't bother coming back." I paused at the door and turned to them one last time. "I think that's the first thing we've agreed on." Then I left. Outside, the air was sharp and cold but clean. It hit my lungs like a reminder that I was still here, still standing, still real. I I slid behind the wheel of my car, let the engine hum to life, and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes the loudest scream is walking away. 3 weeks passed before the first message came through. It was from Mom, short, polite, polished like she'd rewritten it 5 times and still wasn't sure it would land. Hey, sweetheart. We've been talking and think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we chat sometime this week? Hope you're, well, love you. No punctuation after love you. Just those words hanging awkwardly like a coat on the wrong hook. I didn't respond. 2 days later, another. Please don't let this one thing ruin everything. Your sister is very upset. Dad's trying to stay calm, but you know how he gets when he feels blindsided. Oh yes, when he feels blindsided, not when he commits fraud or lies to his daughter for years. So I said nothing. Then came a voicemail from Dad. I didn't listen. I stared at the notification, then deleted it. The last time he'd called me kiddo, it was when I offered to help him set up his retirement account and he said, "Let's leave the money stuff to people who understand it, right?" As if that were him. Then came an email from my sister. You really think this makes you the winner? Fine, take the house, but don't come crying back when you realize money doesn't buy family. Followed by another message, Mom and Dad are really stressed. They're talking about selling the condo. That was the moment I actually laughed, harder than I'd laughed all month. Meanwhile, I'd started fixing up the house, my house. Dusty at first, a little unloved, but solid. I hired a contractor to touch up the paint, replaced the old windows, cleared out the furniture my parents stored there, and donated most of it. I kept one chair, a navy blue armchair I vaguely remembered from my childhood, the only piece that didn't feel like it came with strings attached. The tenants were kind. One left me a thank you note after I lowered their rent by $50, saying I was the first landlord to treat them like a human being. That meant more to me than any recycled apology ever could. It's funny the things you notice when the noise dies down. The silence that once felt heavy and personal becomes peaceful. Space you finally get to stretch into. I stopped checking my phone every hour, stopped waiting for the next guilt-laced message. I began sleeping through the night. Then one afternoon, I discovered a letter in my mailbox. Not a text, not an email, a real letter addressed in Mom's handwriting. I held it in my hands for a while before opening it, not because I thought it might hold anything genuine, but because I wanted to mark the moment. The envelope carried the scent of her perfume. Inside were 2 neatly written pages, filled with lines like, "We didn't know. It wasn't on purpose. We just wanted what was best for everyone." My favorite line read, "You've always been so strong. We didn't realize you ever needed us." That's what people say when your silence has benefited them and they're searching for a reason they never bothered to ask why you pulled away. She ended with, "We hope one day you'll come home. Maybe we can start again. Maybe we can be a family." No mention of paying anything back. No acknowledgement of stolen money, deceit, or the fact that I'd been cut out of the family portrait. Like an ex no one wants to talk about. I slid the letter into a drawer. Didn't respond. Didn't toss it out either. That was the last time she reached out to me directly. 3 years later, I ran into my former neighbor at a bookstore. She asked if I was still managing the property. I smiled. "Still am." She paused, then said, "I heard your parents went through a tough time." I didn't say anything. She nodded. "Well, you look happy. That's good." And I was. I am. I still live in that house. Not out of necessity, not to prove anything, but because it brings me peace. It's mine. I wake to birdsong and soft sunlight instead of creaky footsteps in the hallway and snide comments about how I never call. I rebuilt the garden out back, repainted the front steps. The windowsills are lined with plants that thrive on light and not much else. There's a photo on my mantle now. Me standing in front of the house, holding the keys. No one else in the frame, just me. It's my favorite picture because no one had to be cut out of it. I still hear from them once in a while. A forwarded message, a note through a cousin, a Christmas card that simply says, "Thinking of you, Hope you're doing well. No return. Address, I never write back. And the strange thing is, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for justice, closure, or even an apology, because I already have what they never managed to give me. My name printed on something permanent, a place to belong, a life that's mine. There was a time I believed that if I just worked hard enough, just earned it, maybe they'd love me like they loved her. But real love, the kind that counts, isn't something you have to earn. It's given freely. What they offered was conditional. What I gave myself was everything they didn't. So no, I don't miss them. I don't rehearse old conversations. I don't fantasize about emotional reunions or flawless apologies that rewrite the past, because I've already rewritten it. The life I have now didn't come with approval or pretty packaging. It came from doing the hardest thing, walking away. And that, it turns out, was the only gift I ever truly needed.